Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. Most people think freedom means peace, calm, getting along with everyone. But in real life, that version of freedom is often a trap. As a psychologist, I've seen this again and again. People who silence themselves to avoid tension, who hold back the truth to keep relationships smooth, who would rather stay anxious than risk being disliked. That's not freedom. That's quiet suffering. We grow up taught to be agreeable, polite, and non-confrontational. But here's the hard truth. Avoiding conflict usually means avoiding authenticity. It's a survival response. Your brain is wired to fear rejection because once upon a time being cast out from the group meant death. But today, that same fear makes people say yes when they mean no, laugh at jokes that offend them, and stay in situations that drain them. You don't need to go looking for conflict, but you need to stop running from it. Because when you avoid necessary confrontation, you abandon yourself to please others. Over time, that builds resentment, self-doubt, and emotional fatigue. Freedom doesn't come from getting along with everyone. It comes from being able to look someone in the eye and say, "This doesn't work for me," without shaking. So if you feel anxious around disagreement, know this. It doesn't mean you're weak. It means you were trained to survive, not to thrive. But now, you're old enough to choose differently. You are allowed to take up space, even when it makes others uncomfortable. Let's get started. Number 1. Freedom does not mean the absence of conflict, but the ability to confront it without fear. We often hear people say they just want peace or to live a quiet life. But real freedom is not about keeping everything smooth and conflict-free. That kind of peace is usually fake. It is a performance, one where you smile, stay polite, and bite your tongue just to keep things from getting messy. But the truth is, freedom does not mean the absence of conflict. It means having the courage to face it without shrinking. Think of it like this. If you can only feel okay when everyone around you agrees with you or approves of you, you are not free. You are dependent. You are emotionally handcuffed to other people's reactions. And every time you avoid standing up for yourself or avoid a necessary conversation because you are afraid it will make things uncomfortable, you give away a piece of your freedom. From a psychological point of view, this is tied to your nervous system. Avoiding conflict is a learned survival response. Many of us grew up believing that if we disagree, we will be punished, abandoned, or unloved. So we adapt. We blend in. We stay silent. But over time, that silence turns into resentment, anxiety, and disconnection from who we really are. Philosophers like Nietzsche and psychologists like Carl Jung both warned us. If you refuse to face what threatens you, it will eventually control you. Jung called this the shadow. It is all the parts of you that you hide to stay acceptable. And guess what? Avoiding conflict feeds the shadow. It keeps you fragmented. True liberty is when you can face someone or something that challenges your sense of self and not flinch. It means knowing who you are well enough that disagreement does not destroy you. It strengthens you. That is not just freedom. That is psychological adulthood, and it is rare, but it is possible. And it starts the moment you stop needing everyone to be comfortable with your truth. Number 2. Fear of conflict is often fear of judgment. Most people think they are afraid of conflict, but if you dig a little deeper, that's not quite true. What they are really afraid of is judgment. It's not the argument itself, it's how they think they'll be seen during that argument. Will they think I'm rude, too sensitive, aggressive, selfish? That's the real fear. This is something I see all the time, in therapy rooms, in classrooms, in everyday conversations. People will hold back what they truly believe just to avoid being misunderstood. They'll say yes when they want to say no. They'll nod in agreement when something inside them is screaming the opposite. Why? Because they are terrified of being labeled. They'd rather betray themselves than be called difficult. From a psychological standpoint, this behavior makes perfect sense. Our brains are wired to seek belonging. Thousands of years ago, being cast out from the group meant death. So we evolved to avoid anything that might make us stand out or be rejected. Conflict threatens that. And judgment, especially social rejection, triggers our nervous system the same way physical danger does. That's how powerful it is. But here's the thing. When you constantly trade truth for approval, you don't avoid conflict. You just turn it inward. That silent war becomes anxiety. It becomes resentment. It becomes a life that doesn't feel like yours. Philosophers like Sartre and psychologists like Carl Rogers talked about authenticity as the core of freedom. To live fully, you must be willing to risk not being liked. You must accept that being judged is the cost of being real. And strangely enough, the moment you stop fearing judgment, you start attracting people who actually respect you. So the next time your chest tightens at the thought of speaking your mind, ask yourself, is it the conflict I fear, or the story someone might write about me in their head? That answer could change your life. Number 3. The desire to be liked is one of the most effective prisons ever built. Let's be honest. Almost everyone wants to be liked. It feels good. It feels safe. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The desire to be liked is one of the most powerful prisons a person can live in. And the bars are invisible. They're made of fear, approval, and silence. From a psychological point of view, this makes sense. Our brains are wired to seek connection. We are social creatures, and for most of human history, being part of the group meant survival. Being rejected could literally get you killed. So we evolved to care deeply about how others see us. But what once kept us alive can now keep us small. When your decisions are shaped by how others might react, you stop living from the inside out. You start editing yourself. You water down your opinions so no one gets uncomfortable. You pretend to agree. You laugh at jokes that make you cringe. And slowly, without realizing it, you start disappearing. Not physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre once said, "Hell is other people." Not because people are bad, but because when we live for their approval, we lose access to ourselves. That desire to be liked sterilizes authenticity. It makes your life a performance. And over time, performances get exhausting. Think about it. How many times have you said yes when you wanted to say no, just to avoid seeming rude? How often have you kept your mouth shut, not because you agreed, but because you were scared of what someone might think? Here's what most people don't realize. The more you chase approval, the more invisible you become. Real connection comes from honesty, not likability. You do not need to be liked by everyone to live a meaningful life. You just need to be seen, fully, clearly, and truthfully, even if it makes some people uncomfortable. That is where real freedom begins. Number 4. Conflict is not a deviation from the path to freedom, but a test of it. Let's clear something up. Conflict is not a sign that something's wrong with you or your relationships. It's not a mistake on the path to freedom, it is the path. Or more accurately, it's the test that shows whether you're actually free, or just playing it safe. Every time you avoid a necessary confrontation, whether it's with your partner, your boss, your friend, or even yourself, you make a trade. You give up a little piece of your autonomy in exchange for short-term comfort. You keep the peace, but at what cost? Your voice, your boundaries, your truth. Psychologically, this is called fawning, a trauma response where you go along to get along. It's not submission out of respect, it's submission out of fear. Fear of disapproval, fear of rejection, fear of consequences. So you swallow your needs, dress your discomfort up in politeness, and tell yourself it's not worth it. But inside, you start shrinking. Philosophers like Nietzsche and thinkers like Viktor Frankl understood this well. Freedom is not the ability to do whatever you want. It's the ability to stay true to yourself when doing so might cost you something: approval, comfort, control. Think of it like this: a person who only speaks up when it's easy is not free. A person who only sets boundaries when everyone agrees is not free. A person who avoids conflict every time it threatens their image or relationships is choosing peace over selfhood. And that's not peace. That's quiet oppression. The real test is what you do when being honest threatens your comfort. Do you betray yourself to keep others happy, or do you speak anyway, knowing the risk? Avoiding conflict may feel like control, but it's just another form of fear wearing a friendly face. Freedom doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it feels like shaking hands. Sometimes it feels like losing people. But it always feels like telling the truth. Number 5. Those who avoid conflict tend to become passive-aggressive. Let's talk about what really happens when you avoid conflict, because it doesn't just disappear, it mutates. When you swallow your frustration, when you tell yourself, it's not worth the fight, when you keep letting things slide just to avoid tension, that anger doesn't go away, it just goes underground. And underground emotions don't die, they rot. This is where passive-aggressive behavior comes in. People who are afraid of direct conflict often express their anger sideways. They sigh loudly instead of saying what's wrong. They become sarcastic instead of honest. They forget to do things. They pull away emotionally, give the cold shoulder, or become subtly controlling. Not to hurt, but to feel in control again. Psychologically, this is self-protection. If you grew up in a home or culture where anger was punished or seen as dangerous, you probably learned to suppress it. You learned that being direct was risky. But suppression is not the same as resolution. Suppressed anger festers. And what festers leaks into your tone, your body language, your energy. You may not say anything, but people around you will feel the tension. Passive-aggressive behavior is emotional smoke from a fire that no one's talking about. Philosophers like Kierkegaard warned us that self-deception is the deadliest kind, because it keeps you from facing what is actually hurting you. And Carl Jung said, what you resist not only persists, but grows. So the next time you catch yourself rolling your eyes instead of speaking your mind, ask yourself, what am I avoiding? What am I afraid will happen if I tell the truth? Anger isn't the enemy. Unspoken anger is. Passive aggressiveness ruins relationships not because it's loud, but because it's confusing, indirect, and slowly erodes trust. Real maturity is not in never feeling anger. It's in learning to express it without guilt and without fear. Directness is not cruelty, it's clarity. And clarity is love in its most grown-up form. Number 6. Most people confuse peace with quiet. Most people think peace means quiet. No raised voices, no tension, no drama, just smooth conversation and everyone getting along. But let's be honest, quiet isn't always peace. Sometimes it's just fear in a pretty outfit. That kind of quiet can come from repression, where one or more people are holding back their real thoughts to avoid rocking the boat. It can come from fear of being judged, abandoned, misunderstood. Or it can come from manipulation, where someone is controlling the room so tightly that no one dares to speak up. In psychology, this shows up all the time. People come into therapy saying, I had a peaceful childhood, only to realize later they were just raised in a home where conflict wasn't allowed. Voices weren't raised, but neither were needs. Emotions were stuffed, not soothed. They were taught that silence equals safety. But silence can also mean suppression. Real peace is something else entirely. Real peace is built on honesty, boundaries, truth, and mutual respect. And to get there, sometimes you need a storm first. You need to have the hard conversation. You need to raise your voice, not to harm, but to be heard. You need to tell the truth, even when your hands shake. Philosopher Hegel once said, genuine tragedies in the world are not conflicts between right and wrong. They are conflicts between two rights. And this is key. Conflict isn't always a sign something's broken. It's often a sign that two truths are trying to coexist. And that process can be uncomfortable. But avoiding that discomfort doesn't lead to peace. It leads to pretense. It leads to relationships where everyone's smiling, but no one feels safe enough to be real. So the next time you find yourself calling something peaceful, ask yourself, is this peace, or is this just silence born of fear? Peace is not the absence of noise. It's the presence of truth, and sometimes truth arrives with thunder. Number 7. You are not being noble by avoiding conflict. You may just be cowardly. Let's get something straight. Avoiding conflict doesn't automatically make you a good person. It might make you polite. It might make you easy to be around. But let's not confuse that with nobility. Sometimes avoiding conflict is not a sign of virtue. It's a sign of fear. Or worse, moral laziness dressed up as keeping the peace. We like to tell ourselves that staying quiet, turning the other cheek, or not making it a big deal is mature. But often it's just convenient. It lets us dodge discomfort. It keeps things looking smooth on the surface while everything underneath is tense, dishonest, and unresolved. Psychologically, the human brain avoids what feels threatening. And confrontation feels threatening. It challenges our sense of safety. It risks rejection. So we take the easier path. We stay silent. We let things go. We tell ourselves it's not worth it. But truth without courage is useless, and peace without honesty is fake. Philosopher Emmanuel Levinas once said that ethics begins when the face of the other demands responsibility. In other words, morality isn't just about being nice. It's about standing up when something wrong is happening, even if it makes things uncomfortable. Sometimes, the truly noble thing is to speak the truth that no one wants to hear, to call out the subtle injustice, to say no when it would be easier to say nothing. Avoiding conflict doesn't make you the bigger person. Sometimes it just makes you absent from the moment where integrity was needed most. Moral growth isn't about being agreeable. It's about being brave enough to tell the truth, kindly, clearly, and consistently, even when it costs you. So ask yourself, am I staying silent because it's right, or just because it's easier? Real maturity is the ability to feel discomfort and still choose honesty over ease. That's not just character, that's courage. Number 8. To fear conflict is to fear yourself. To fear conflict isn't always about fearing the other person. Sometimes it's about fearing what you might become in that moment. How angry you might get. How honest you might sound. How real you might finally be. That's why some people avoid confrontation like it's fire. Because deep down, they're not just afraid of a reaction, they're afraid of themselves. In psychology, this is called repression. You push down the parts of you that feel too intense, too sharp, too emotional, especially if you were taught that anger, assertiveness, or even strong opinions were too much. But pushing it down doesn't erase it. It just buries it deeper, where it becomes harder to control. Carl Jung talked about this as the shadow, the parts of your personality you disown to stay acceptable. And the irony is, the more you deny your shadow, the more control it has over you. So when conflict arises, you panic, not just because of what might be said, but because of what might surface. The rage, the resentment, the need, the honesty you've been avoiding. That fear is powerful. But here's the truth. Whatever you refuse to face within yourself will control you from the background. Every avoided argument, every sugar-coated conversation, every fake smile, they all protect an image of you that isn't complete. Conflict, when approached with self-awareness, doesn't unleash chaos. It reveals truth. It shows you where your boundaries are, where your wounds still ache, and what still needs healing. But to get there, you have to stop fearing what lives inside you. To fear conflict is to fear your own emotional power. But power doesn't mean destruction, it means clarity. It means saying, this is what I feel, and I'm not ashamed of it. When you finally stop running from yourself, conflict stops feeling like a threat. It starts feeling like a doorway. Well, number 9. Conflict is where values reveal themselves. People love to talk about their values. Honesty, respect, compassion, integrity. It sounds great in conversation, in job interviews, on social media bios. But let's be honest, anyone can sound virtuous when everything is going smoothly. The real test of your values isn't how you behave in peace. It's how you respond in conflict. Conflict strips away the performance. It brings heat, pressure, discomfort. And under pressure, the truth shows. That's where you find out what you actually believe, not what you say you believe. You say you value honesty, but when disagreement shows up, do you stay silent to avoid being disliked? You say you value respect, but do you start talking over people when you feel attacked? You say you believe in boundaries, but do you abandon your own when the room gets tense? Psychologically, this is about congruence, the alignment between your values and your behavior. Carl Rogers, one of the founding voices in humanistic psychology, said people suffer when they're living out of sync with their core beliefs. And nothing reveals that misalignment faster than conflict. Philosophers like Aristotle believed that virtue is only real when practiced under pressure. It's not a belief if it only lives in theory. Courage only becomes courage when fear is present. Integrity only becomes real when lying would be easier. Kindness only matters when you're angry and still choose not to harm. Conflict is life asking, what do you actually stand for? It puts your values on trial. You can't fake your way through it. Your tone, your choices, your reactions. They all speak for you, and they speak honestly. So don't run from conflict. Pay attention to it. It's revealing you to yourself. It's showing you who you are under stress. And that version is far more real than the one you curate in calm waters. In the fire, the mask slips. And what's underneath is the truth you've been living, whether you knew it or not. Number 10. The myth of universal harmony is a tool of control. Absolutely. Here's a powerful and psychologically rich 350-word elaboration, written in clear, everyday language with a tone that feels like a professor lifting the curtain on something many sense but few have words for. There's a comforting idea we've all been sold at some point, that harmony is always good, and if everyone just got along, the world would be better. But here's the truth. The myth of universal harmony is often a tool of control, because when people are too focused on getting along, they stop asking hard questions. They stop disagreeing. They stop resisting what needs to be challenged. Think about it. In families, workplaces, even cultures, how often are people told to keep the peace, not stir things up, or be a team player? When what they really mean is, don't challenge authority or don't make people uncomfortable. Systems, whether political, religious, educational, or social, often use the ideal of harmony to keep everyone in line. Not because they care about peace, but because they fear disruption. Harmony becomes a weapon. It tells people, especially those with less power, to stay quiet, blend in, go along. It rewards conformity, not truth. From a psychological perspective, this is tied to groupthink, a phenomenon where the desire to maintain harmony leads to poor decision-making, because people suppress their own doubts just to stay accepted. They start to think, if I disagree, maybe I'm the problem. And over time, they disconnect from their own inner compass. Philosophers like Michel Foucault pointed out that power often hides behind the illusion of consensus. If everyone seems to agree, no one questions who benefits most from the silence. But real progress doesn't come from manufactured harmony. It comes from friction, from difference, from people brave enough to disrupt the script. Harmony is not the absence of conflict. It's what happens after truth has been spoken and heard and wrestled with. That's not comfort, that's courage. So the next time someone pressures you to just get along, ask yourself, is this harmony or is this quiet obedience? There's a big difference, and your voice might be the one that needs to break the silence. In final words, certainly. Here is a powerful, grounded, and emotionally intelligent conclusion to your topic. It speaks like a professor who genuinely cares about truth and freedom, someone who's not preaching, but inviting. If you want to be free, stop being afraid of conflict. Nietzsche. This isn't just a philosophical punchline, it's a psychological reality. Most people spend their lives managing impressions, softening truths, and avoiding confrontation. Not because they're peaceful, but because they're afraid of being disliked, afraid of losing people, afraid of discovering parts of themselves they've kept buried. So they trade freedom for comfort and call it maturity. But inside, they shrink. Their voice goes quiet. Their needs get edited. Their authenticity slowly erodes. Here's the truth. Conflict is not the enemy. It's not a sign of failure. It's the pressure that reveals what's real, your values, your limits, your courage. It forces you to ask yourself, who am I when things aren't easy? Can I still show up as myself when the room gets tense? When the stakes are high? When being honest might cost me something? Psychologically, avoiding conflict is often tied to early experiences. Many people learned that being calm was the only way to stay safe, that silence was safer than truth. But that belief, while once useful, becomes a prison in adulthood. You can't be truly free while walking on eggshells in your own life. So here's the invitation. Start small. Tell the truth, even when it's awkward. Hold your boundaries, even when your voice shakes. Disagree with respect, but without apology. Let people see you. Not the version that keeps the peace, but the version that stands in it. Freedom is not about escaping discomfort. It's about learning to walk through it without losing yourself. You won't lose everyone. And the ones who stay, the ones who respect the full version of you, that's where real connection begins. Not in harmony, but in honesty. That's not rebellion. That's adulthood. That's freedom. Stay sharp. Stay honest. Stay awake. Thank you for watching and see you in another episode.